When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man. Stanley Kubrick, American film director, screenwriter, producer, and photographer. All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. Good morning to you, time surfing alien. All right. Do me a favor, folks. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folk out there, hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. All right, today is episode 2 in my series, Memoirs of a Liberty Dad. During this series, rather than really focusing on like research and facts and data to discuss politics or culture, I focus on stories from my life. And these stories led me to become the man, the husband, and the father that I am today. You, the audience, of course, get to know me a little bit better. And then I put my views of the world into context based on my experiences. This series isn't necessarily a chronological retelling of my life, but rather just life stories that fit the news of the day. Today, I have 3 short stories related to what does it mean to be a man. So let's dive right into these stories here. Um, Rite of passage. One of the things that I think is missing from our culture for young men, for men, is a rite of passage. Now, there are various, you could talk about all different kinds of rites of passage, but effectively it's just this moment, a defining moment where a young man becomes a man. And when that happens, here's there's this moment, like you do this, you say this or whatever, like there's some moment that says now you're a man. And other men, men who've been men, they look and they say, "We recognize you now as a man." And then they expect you to act like a man, and they treat you like a man. Those are like the three major points of this rite of passage, right? It's a defining moment. Maybe it was that for a defining moment. The men, recognize you now, like kind of like one there. They recognize like now you're a man. They treat you like a man. They expect you to act like a man. Right, and there are a variety of things that come with those expectations. Some of them, you could argue and say that's not really a good expectation. Others, definitely so. All right, so my rite of passage, it wasn't as phenomenal as like, there's a tribe out in the Amazon, and they weave these mittens, which sounds kind of not so manly, but hold on. They weave these mittens together, and then they go and catch bullet ants. They knock them out, and they catch them, and they stuff the heads into the mittens. And then when the bullet ants come to, you have these bullet ant mittens. And now it's sounding a lot more manly. And the young men have to wear them for like 10 minutes, right? And like that's their rite of passage. Now I'm not like my rite of passage was nothing like that. And thankfully so, I wouldn't necessarily I've never been bitten by a bullet ant, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that it's going to be extremely unpleasant. But the point being, that's this defining moment. That's what the young men in this tribe had to do. And then, of course, after that, the men treat them like a man. They're like, "You're a man now," and they treat them like a man. They expect them to be a man, right? Like it's all 3 components are there. So mine was a lot simpler than that. Once I was 18, I moved out and I was living with my best friend at the time. And we lived in a small town, and my best friend and I moved into an apartment, and we lived like his parents were about a mile from where we lived, and then my parents were about a mile in like a slightly different direction than where we lived. So we were still close to our parents, and so I could go over to my mom and dad's house, whenever I wanted for dinner, right? Or lunch. I could go over there all the time. And I had this habit I would go over there and I would ask them the questions about life, like, something I was facing. And I would be like, Mom, Dad, I got a question for you, blah, 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 blah. What do you think I should do? And one day, my dad just threw me for a loop. He said, Son, you're a man now. It's time for you to make a decision and live by it. That was it. He didn't give me my answer. I don't remember what I asked him, but I didn't get the answer. He's like, You're a man now. You have to make a decision and you have to live by it. Oh, okay. It's very simple. Like I said, definitely not bullet ants. And so from that moment, I learned, you know, like I have to make decisions and who knows how they will turn out. Sometimes they may turn out good, sometimes maybe not so much. So I would consider that to be my rite of passage. And my dad meant it. Like he didn't play games. He wasn't like later treating me like a little kid again. Nope. He treated me like a man. That doesn't mean that he didn't offer advice after that moment. But what he was doing was saying, like, son, it's one thing to come and get advice from time to time. It's another thing to just ask about everything. It's like you're basically trying to get us to live your life for you, and we can't do that. You have to be a man. You have to make decisions. You have to do that. But there are times where, yes, you can come and get some advice because, obviously you're an 18-year-old guy and you don't know things. And, there's going to be some times where you're really not sure. Or maybe you don't know because, you just haven't lived enough to acquire the information that we have. So that's where it stood. So that's my first story. The second story is kind of similar. Um, and I think I mentioned this on the podcast the other day. I said that, or I mentioned it somewhere. I'm not sure who I was talking to. I can't remember if it was on the podcast or if I was talking to one of my friends, but I had made this comment about, high school and school not being real life. And in a sense, it's kind of comparable to, Twitter's not a real place. High school's, feels like a real place. It is a real place in the strictest sense, but once you graduate, things are entirely different. And you become friends with people that you might never have been friends with in high school. And when one of my early jobs that I had when I was about 19, maybe 20, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I worked for Rent a Center. They would, I was an account manager. So my job was on Monday mornings, we would print out a list. And so we each had a section of the city, some sort of way of designating the city. And we would each do this printout, like all the account managers. And what we would do is we would go through it and we would take highlighters. We would take a yellow, pink, and then also a green highlighter. And so what we would do is we would start with people that were way past due. And these are people that were past due, um, you know, like even a day. So they had missed their payment. Um, I think that was it. It was just people that had completely missed their payment. They were behind. So you marked them in pink. And then you would go and you would mark the ones who were not past due, but maybe they had a rocky history. Maybe they missed a couple of payments, but they caught back up. Okay. So these people would be marked in yellow. And then the people in green were people that were not past due and had never missed a payment. So what you would do is you would start working with those in pink and you would call up because the goal was to call everybody, but you would start with the pink and you would call those people and be like, hey, you need to make a payment today, or we need to we need to schedule a pickup. Right. And the people in yellow, you would call once you got done with the pink, you would call the people in yellow and you would say, hey, Mrs. Jones, just wanted to let you know that your payment for your sofa is due this week. Please make sure to have it in by such and such date, whatever date was she was scheduled for, right? And then if you got done with all of those, then you might call the green, right? Like you might call them, you might not. A lot of that was kind of like based on, knowing your customers and knowing, if you like for the most part, like some people would pay early and you probably didn't call them, but maybe some people would call you right on the day of. So they were still on time, they were still green, but you might call them just to kind of let them know like, hey, just courtesy reminder. Your payments due this week. Uh, don't believe that you're going to be late, but I just wanted to give you that courtesy reminder. All right. So that's how it worked. And so what happens is when you call people and you talk to them and you say, "Hey, you're late," or your payments due. A lot of people will have stories to tell you. They're like, "Oh, well, my son is really sick," and so then you had to make a judgment call. You had to determine, like, okay, am I gonna allow this person, to go to be a day late or 2 days late or something like that, right? Will I let them pay next week? And it was a judgment call based on any number of factors. Ideally, you would try to get the payment in, period. Like the way that it was explained to me when I was there was like, look, once they make their house payment, once they make their car payment, once they make all these other payments, we get whatever's left over. So we gotta work our way to get our money somewhere before somebody else does, right? Or before they run out of money. That was our goal. So I had this habit because I wasn't sure. I would go to my boss, and my boss was one of those guys that I was just talking about that I would never have been friends with in high school. And he was a nice guy. Nothing wrong with him. He was actually a very good guy. I actually really liked him a lot. And he he just happened to be the jock, and I was not the sports oriented person. I was definitely not a jock of any kind, and I wasn't really in the cool crowd in high school. So him and I would have like probably never been friends. We may not have been enemies. I don't know how. I don't know how he acted in school, but he was definitely the jock. We both knew that. He was really into sports. He played on the football team, so on and so forth. So I would go to him and I would say, and I'm trying to remember his name. I'm just trying to blank his name at the moment. But I would go to him and I would say, "Hey, Mrs. Jones said that, she's been in the hospital the last 3 days and she's just recovering and she's trying to, get back to work or whatever, and she's a waitress and, whatever." I would go and tell him the story. I'm like, "What do you think I should do, boss?" Now you might say, DL, didn't you learn your lesson from your dad?" Well, yes, sort of. Okay. My dad told me this when I was 18. I was working at Rent Center when I was like 20. I hadn't quite worked it out just yet. Like I was getting there. So here I am on the job asking my manager questions about my job. And finally he got irritated. And I come in one time and I was like, "Hey, yeah, man, I wish I could remember his name. I can see his face. I can't. I mean, if I saw him, I would recognize him, but I just can't think of his name for the life of me." But anyway, so I would go into his office and I would be like, "Hey, Mr. Boss." It's not really what I said. I would call him by his name, which I can't remember. But say, "Hey, Mr. Boss, Miss Jones, blah, blah, blah." And one day he just got annoyed and he was like, he just put his stuff down and he looked at me squarely in the eye and he said, "Dan, my name is DL is Dan, Daniel." He said, "Dan, I pay you to do a job. I pay you to make decisions. Go in there and start making decisions." Oh, okay. Right. Now you see what's happening here? Like he didn't give me my rite of passage, but he did expect me to be decisive. He expected me to act like a man. Do your job. You're paid to do this job. Go do it, right? Your job is partly to make decisions, and you will have to learn to live by those decisions. So there I was, learning how to make decisions on the job, right? And learning to live by them. And it's funny because years later, and I won't tell the whole story on this one, but years later, I was working for a company, a fastener company, and I started out in the warehouse, and an opportunity came available to me, and so I applied for it, and I was interviewing with the manager at that job, and this is years later, and it was funny because I told him he was like, he was telling me about the job, and so I told him, I said, "Well, I'm just going to tell you right now, if you leave me in a position to make a decision, I will make it." And he said, "I'm glad to hear that. Good." And he goes, "Just make sure you stand by your decision." And I said, "I will." Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that I don't look back and say, "Yeah, that was a bad decision." But that means don't say, "Oh, well, so and so," and try to shove the blame if it goes wrong. No, you got to stand by it and say, "Look, I made this decision. Here's the information that I used to make my decision, and I stand by my decision. I stand by having made the decision, but maybe you might look back and say, I can see where I missed some information and I should have made a better decision. Or maybe you say, you know what? No, the decision turned out badly, but I made the decision, and I am confident that based on the information that I had available to me at the time, that I made the correct one. Right. Like, so that's what it means to make a decision and stand by it. So it's just funny, like some of those early experiences led me to a position, where I was able to be confident about decision. And there were times where I did make decisions confidently. And there have been times where I have made bad decisions. Sometimes it was just a flat out bad decision. And sometimes it was a good decision at the time with the information that was available to me. But it turned out to be the wrong decision nonetheless. Wrong meaning in terms of the result, not necessarily the decision itself. So, these are the experiences that I had, in my early years. People were expecting me to be a man, and part of that, in their eyes, was you need to learn to make a decision. Okay, cool. So let me tell you about another story. So this is in my 30s. Okay, so we got 18, we got like in my early 20s, somewhere around 20, maybe 20, 21, somewhere around there. Might even been 22, I don't know, but some in my early 20s. And so now scroll forward into my early 30s. I was like 31 or 32 when this happened. Now, I generally try to keep it family friendly. This one might cross over to PG-13 a little bit. Not too bad. It'll be fine. So I'm out with some friends. I live in Charlotte, and I joined this group called Charlotte Young Adults. I think it was called CYA, I think, Charlotte Young Adults. And I was actually one of the older people in there. Most of them were in their like late 20s, and I was like 31, 32. I kind of slid in. And so I'm out with a bunch of guys, and we're at a bar or something like that, like one of those like bar slash restaurant type things. And we're hanging out, we're having a good time. And I I don't have uh this breadth of knowledge of alcohol. So I was like, I don't know what to drink. And so I was looking at the menu, and at the time I think I was starting to go on like a relatively lower sugar diet, or I was trying to. So I was trying to avoid some of the drinks that had like, tons and tons of sugars and all this kind of stuff in it. And so I asked the waitress, I was like, "Hey, what do you recommend?" And she's like, "Well, what do you like? Well, what kind of liquor do you like?" I was looking for a liquor drink because I don't drink beer. Beer doesn't sit well with me. So I'm like, "Well, I like vodka." And I was like, "But I'm not very familiar with a lot of vodka drinks." And she was like, "Okay." She goes, "How about a vodka and cranberry?" And I said, "Oh, that sounds fine. Like, why not?" So she brings my drink over, and I I take it, and I'm just about to my lips. And my buddy, he says, "Are you on your period?" And I was like, "Huh?" And he asked me again. He's like, "Dude, are you on your period?" And I was like, What are you talking about?" He's like, "That's a girl drink." Okay. I'm like, "It's vodka." He's like, "Yeah, but it has cranberry juice in it." Oh, it's a girl drink? And he's like, "Yeah, dude." He's like, "Why are you drinking a woman drink?" I was like, "Oh." So I put it down. And then I called the waitress over, and I was giving her a little hard time. Nothing mean. I wasn't being mean. I was just being kind of like a playful hard time. I was like, "Hey, why you do this to me?" I was like, "You get me in trouble in front of my buddies here." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Gave me you recommended this drink, and they're all telling me it's a woman's drink." And she started laughing, and she said, "I'll be back. I'll get you something." I think she brought back vodka and lemonade or something. I don't remember, but something else, something kind of similar. And so then I drank that. We continued having our good time or whatever. So I go to work. This is like on the weekend. So I go back to work, and this is the fastener place. And I have my buddy that I work with closely. And his name is Scott. And I'm telling my buddy Scott about this. And Scott starts laughing, and he's like, "Dude, he goes, let me tell you a story." And I was like, "Okay." So he tells me about this guy that was in college with him. And he said this dude was like, when you look at him, he was a big guy, just burly. You would be like, "Man, that is a man." Just looking at him, you're thinking, "That's a man's man right there." And he said this guy loved like all these quote unquote girly drinks, right? And he would drink them, and all the other guys would give him a hard time. And he said, "Man, this guy just didn't care." He was like, "Whatever. I'm gonna drink it anyway. I'll drink too since you're making fun of me." right? Like that's how this guy was. And he just drank. And so my buddy Scott, he was like, you know, he kind of pointed out, he's like, you know, as a man, you have a choice to make. You can be the guy that allows your buddies to dictate to you what you drink, or you could be like my friend in college who just didn't care. Said, I'm going to do what I damn well please. I will drink whatever I want. I will drink a Zima, which, by the way, I tried that once when I was in the military, as a young fellow. And I'm pretty sure I don't think I've ever heard the word fag so many times in my life. Okay. But I did continue drinking it, whatever. But so I've there's a lot of weird stories in my life about alcohol and being made fun of. I don't know, whatever. But you know, like he just was like, you know, you drink whatever you want. So I was like, man, you know what? You're right. That's yeah. I will. Why am I letting my buddies dictate to me what I drink? That's just crazy. Like it just for whatever reason it didn't dawn on me, right? And so from that day forward, I was like, I'll drink whatever I please. And it's funny because I actually later went to parties with some of these guys and I would explicitly bring vodka and cranberry. So just to show them I will drink whatever I want. So, you know, now I get it, like, you know, alcohol, poison, should you drink, yada, all that aside. The point being that I had multiple instances where other men, you know, one where my dad, he kind of said, you're a man now. And then other men along the way had this expectation. Now, the expectation was different, right? In Rent a Center, the expectation was you need to make a decision and stand by it, which I think is kind of ultimately the foundation for being a man. And then later, my buddies, well, they were giving me a hard time about my decisions. And so I was clearly not standing by my decision to drink a vodka and cranberry juice at the recommendation of the waitress. Right. And then my buddy later kind of points out, he's like, well, no, you should be able to drink whatever you want to drink. And who cares? You know, and he basically kind of reinforced this idea, be a man, make a decision, and just stand by it. And to heck with everybody else. So those are some stories that kind of brought me to where I am because now these days, and you can ask my wife, I will make a decision. I have a tendency to make my decisions relatively quickly because most decisions, I believe, do not require the level of, you know, thinking and consideration that a lot of people put into them. I mean, sometimes they do, but I think there are many, many decisions that you can make very quickly, and you can stand by it, and it'll be fine. And so I have a tendency now to be very decisive very quickly. And I'm you cannot cajole me, you know, you cannot give me a hard time about my decision. I will just roll my eyes or be like, whatever. Like I do that all the time. Right. So that's where I am today. Right. And I apply it to many things. And I'm like, if you're another man, good luck at this point, at this juncture in my life. Good luck trying to be like, you know, question my manhood because it's just not going to work. Right. Like that I've already went through those trials and I've learned my lessons, even if I had to maybe learn them a few times in a row. And there's probably a few other stories that I'm forgetting. You know, so it's not like there was just these three. There's probably some other ones. So, you know, that's where I am today. And we're going to bring this into the current culture and politics right after this intermission. So hold tight. We'll be back and we're going to discuss this a little further. I want to show you guys this new ad that I came across.
For years, Matt Johnson was a fighter for freedom in the GOP, believing they were the party of limited government and maximum freedom. He was wrong. The GOP has betrayed our trust over and over again. When COVID hit, it wasn't Florida Democrats in charge picking winners and losers. It was the Republicans who locked the state down, crushing small businesses. The GOP's promises of liberty are nothing but brazen lies. They've proven it time and time again. They campaign like they're limited government libertarians, then rule like dictatorial Democrats the moment they're in power. Meet Matt Johnson, the bold libertarian voice for Florida House District 29. He left the GOP for the Libertarian Party because he stands for freedom in practice rather than in hollow promise. If you're tired of government intrusion in your life, stop voting for it. If you don't like what your children are being force-fed in government schools, vote for the freedom to choose the best education for your kids without exceptions. If you're sick and tired of government bureaucrats standing in the way of your ability to run your business, vote to cut the red tape. Matt will slash permits and fees, letting entrepreneurs breathe, thrive, and feed their families. We're adults. It's time to grow up and run our own lives. End the overreach, empower the people, vote genuine liberty, and stop buying the GOP counterfeit. Stop doing the same thing and expecting different results. Vote Libertarian. Vote Matt Johnson for Florida House District 29. Because freedom isn't just an empty campaign slogan. It's a fundamental foundation for a thriving future. Volunteer and donate now and join Matt Johnson in reclaiming our freedom, our future, and our foundation. Because liberty is life.
All right, we are back. I'm loving that that ad from Matt Johnson down in DeLand, Florida. DeLand, I think it's DeLand. I think I said that wrong. A couple quick comments here. Yes, that Liberty Lady points out you can learn more about Matt's campaign at matt4flhouse.com. So go there, check that out, support him if you can. She also points out there's an interesting book, and I would recommend it just based on the title here, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Flip. So, yes, we should stop caring so much about what other people think in some context. I mean, there's a time and a place for it. And then last comment here from Time Surfing Alien, Zima gave me the worst hangover I ever had. I don't think I have a particular alcohol that has given me the worst hangover, but I will say I've had some pretty bad ones from consuming too much. And actually, I tell you what, now that I think about it, now that I'm saying it out loud, the party that I mentioned earlier, taking some vodka and cranberry to, just for the record, if you are a drinker, if you're a young person, drink responsibly, and absolutely under no circumstances, when everybody is playing games with beer, should you play games with vodka and cranberry. Promise you, that is a very bad idea. Okay, from experience. Sometimes you got to learn from us old folks. Okay, so us olds have some things to teach you, and I'm going to tell you, it's a very terrible idea. That is probably the worst experience that I've ever had, being foolish like that. So, all right, let's see how are we going to tie this in? So we're talking about being a man. Now, ultimately, what is a man? A man is an adult human male. That's what a man is, like by definition. And then from there, we have variations of what does it mean to be a man, right? Like beyond that. And so I would say that simply making decisions and learning to live by them. That is to me what it means to effectively be a man, right? You have choices to make and you make them, and then you live by them. And sometimes it's, you make a bad decision and then you have to live by that. So let me show you this ad that came out. I don't know if it's an official ad. I think it was, that came out for the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz campaign. You probably have seen it. And it's about being a man, sort of. So let's play this video, and try not to interrupt it too much.
I'm a man.
I'm a man.
I'm a man, man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Neat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
Man enough to deadlift 500 and braid the out of my daughter's hair.
So can I just stop? I'm sorry. I was just stop here. If you're making a video about kind of like, I'm a man, you're illustrating men, I'm just going to say that maybe bleeping the word shit is not really where you want to go. Maybe just write that out so it's not even in there. like that just, like part of me says I will use the English language, the breadth of the English language at my discretion. Okay. And so I don't, I'm not going to bleep myself and be like, while I'm talking about being a man, right? Like, like it's fine to bleep it. Like if you're like, hey, look, I want to keep this family friendly, or which I know I didn't, but like I get it. Like there's a time and a place for that, but maybe not while you're talking about manliness. Just saying.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast.
I ain't afraid of bears.
Okay, that's a carburetors for breakfast. I'm sorry. I know I'm going to try not to interrupt too much more. Um, that might have worked in the 80s and the 90s. That is such a corny line. That is so corny. Okay.
That's what bear hugs are for.
I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of.
There it is, that bleep
Women.
again.
I'm not afraid of women.
I'm not afraid of women.
They want to control their bodies? I say go for it.
They want to use IVF to start a family? I'm not afraid of families.
They want to be childless cat ladies?
Have all the cats you want.
Woman wants to be president?
Well, I hope she has the guts to look me right in the eye and accept my full-throated endorsement.
So, I when I first saw this video, probably the most widest, the most common comment I saw was, people calling it gay. And it's not really a term I prefer to use, but just on this one particular moment, I can kind of see why. That's like really my full-throated endorsement. That okay.
Because I'm man enough to support women.
Man enough to know what kind of donuts I like.
Man enough to admit I'm lost, even when I refuse to ask for directions.
Oh.
Man enough to not ban young women from reading Little Women.
Or one of those pants books that the sisters like.
I'm man enough to raw dog a flight. It sucked.
Okay, I had to look that up because I was like, raw dog. Because look, if you say raw dog, it's a family-friendly show. I'm thinking something entirely different. Okay, but when he said raw dog a flight, I had to look that up. And if you don't know what that is, that's where you get on an airplane and you take your flight and you don't read anything, you don't watch any movies, you just sit there and you stare at the back of the headrest. Okay, so that's what that is. I didn't know what it was. I had to look it up. But again, I have a different context. And so in a manliness video, these are not things that I would have considered putting into it.
Not worth it. I'm man enough to be emotional in front of my wife.
In front of my kids.
In front of my horse.
I'm man enough to tell you that I cry at Love Actually.
Goodwill Hunting.
West Side Story.
That and Predator.
And I'm sick of so-called men domineering, belittling, and controlling women just so they can feel more powerful.
That's not how my mama raised me.
I love women.
I love women who support their families.
Women who decide not to have families.
Women who take charge.
And I'm man enough to help them win.
That video is there's like so much wrong with that. Just so much. Like it's just weird. Okay, so look, afraid of women, I think that's a weird trope that mostly is made up. Okay, I don't think most men are afraid of women. I think most men are competitive, and they I think what often happens is there's a lack of giving them their due when, and I think that I think there are other issues at play, but I don't think it's that they're afraid of women. I don't think that men are afraid of powerful women per se. I think they may have some distorted views of manhood, and that may play a role, but I don't think they're actually afraid of women. And it's just a weird trope. And I wish people would stop saying it because I just don't think it's true. Because when you look at some of these powerful women, they're put in, like, I don't want to say they're put into place, but they get their power with men's approval, right? Like if a woman becomes a CEO, she didn't just like take the CEO position. She got like a board of directors said, yes, we're going to bring you on as a CEO. Right. And like they're supported by other men, many men actually. And so like if there's a woman, like I have a manager at my manager is a woman. Now I didn't put her there because like, that's not how it works, but her manager did, who's a man. And there are plenty of other men who support her, right? Like, this is just a common thing. I don't think it's true. And I think it's just this made up trope that people are running with, and they need to let it go. But here's the real thing. I think, I think I think Democrats and the Democrat Party should be absolutely embarrassed by this video. They should be absolutely like just they should cringe at it, and they should be like, all right, somebody's head needs to roll because that was a god awful video and it should have never seen the light of day ever. Right. But I think that they are probably supporting it. But here's the thing, they're telling men it's okay to, to decide or to tell you how to be a man, right? That's what the video like, hey, you be a man by do this thing. So they're telling men that it's okay to be told how to be a man by other people. But that's not really what being a man is about. It's not being led by the nose of other people. And it kind of means like if they support it, what it really means is they don't believe in their own men. Like they don't believe that their own men, like they're not talking to Republicans. That the video is not for Republicans to try to get them to vote for Democrats. It's to get Democrats to make sure that they show up at the polls. It's to hopefully get some more votes from maybe independents. But it's basically saying like, we have to confirm to you that it's okay to do this and to make a decision and to live by it. Right? That's what they're saying. And I think it's embarrassing. It's the you know what it is? It's the political version of
I'm pregnant.
Already? I'm not ready to be no father right now.
Oh, so you man enough to come up in me, but you ain't man enough to take care of what comes out, get my nails done, get my hair done, pay my rent, and get me a new car?
So like it's the political version of that. That comes from a movie, by the way, very old movie. Don't be a menace to South Central while drinking your gin and juice in the hood. Funny, absolutely hysterical movie. But it's the version of that. It takes one thing that might be a proper expectation of a man making decisions, but then it kind of imposes and says, all right, here are the decisions that you should be making. Right. Like in this video, in that little video clip, the woman's like, she starts off good, like, oh, you got to raise your kid. But then she's like, and get my nails done and my hair done and buy me a new car and do all these things. Right. Like all of a sudden now being a real man comes with doing all these particular things. Right. And to some sense, I would agree that if you're a man and you're going to be with a woman, then you're going to support her. But effectively what they're doing is they're just imposing what decisions a man should make. So it starts off like, well, you as a man should be decisive and make decisions, but these are the decisions that you should make. Right? Like, so you're really telling your men you're not men. That's embarrassing. I would be embarrassed if I would just like choosing what drink I will or will not consume. Right? If I think an issue is important, then I will vote for it or against it, period. If I think a candidate best represents me, man or woman, then I will cast my vote for them. And I really don't owe anyone an explanation. I mean, I can give it if I want, right? That's up to me. But I should be willing to stand by it and say, yes, I voted for or against this thing. Yes, I voted for this candidate, right? In 2020, almost 2 million people voted for the Libertarian candidate, Joe Jorgensen, a woman, almost 2 million people. And you know what we didn't need? We didn't need any videos telling men that it was okay to vote for her because they would be a real man if they did. Now, I don't know the numbers of men who voted for Joe Jorgensen, but I can tell you this much. The Libertarian Party is disproportionately men. And we voted for her. We not only voted for her as our candidate, she was the only, I'm trying to think. Yes, I believe she was the only person, the only woman seeking the nomination for the party. And we voted for her to be our nominee. Then after that, We supported her with signs and stickers and, her campaign online. And then bunch of men did this, right? And then we went to the polls and we voted for her. We told people, I voted for Joe Jorgensen. And none of that was because there was a video that said, yo, men, if you're a real man, you'll vote for Joe Jorgensen. No, we just voted for her because that was the decision that we made. And we stood by it. Now, some people maybe had buyer's remorse, and that's an entirely different conversation. But that's not related to being a man. Lots of people have buyer's remorse. Hey, I thought this was going to turn out this way, and it did not. That's a different story. But ultimately, we stood by our decision, and we were not moved on the basis of her being a man. Or, I'm sorry, her being a woman, right? Like that, we made a decision. We stood by it. Now, I don't know how many men voted for it necessarily, but here's what I can read. I'm going to read you just a list. So here are some of the people that came out publicly and endorsed her. Justin Amash, U.S. Representative for Michigan. James Gray, former judge, Orange County, California. Alex Vanosbla, leader of the Danish Liberal Alliance. Peter Schiff, Ken Bone, Jacob Hornberger, Gary Nolan, Peter Bagg, Nick Gillespie, Jack Hunter, Jeff Jacoby, John Stossel, Jacob Sullum, Jesse Walker, Matt Welch. Anything sounding familiar there? They're all men. Men supported her. Why? Because they're men and they chose to. And they likely would say, yes, I voted for a woman, had nothing to do with the fact that she was a woman. I didn't care about that. She had policies that I could get behind. And if the Democrat Party is having trouble getting men to vote, then maybe they should look at something other than, hey, are you afraid of women? I don't know. Maybe the Democrats are afraid of women. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I'm not a Democrat. Maybe they're afraid of women and they need to be told, hey, look, guys, it's okay. You can have your steak rare if you really want, and you can vote for Kamala Harris. Cool. Nobody's going to be mad at you. And we're going to talk about carburetors so that you feel like a real man. Okay? Like that didn't happen. It's just crazy. Like, I just can't imagine. It's so bizarre to me. This is why I keep saying I think it's a trope. Look, let me end on this. I want to make this show shorter, right? If we want a better society, number one, identify a moment when young guys become men, right? Whatever that is. And it doesn't have to be we can have multiple, we can have different ones, right? Different communities maybe have different ways of defining that moment and saying, all right, young lad, you are now a man. Then expect that they act like a man. Now, we might disagree on what those expectations are, right? When you're in your 20s, all your buddies who are also men, right? They're all men. They might say, oh, you got to sleep with lots of women and drink lots of booze. Okay. Maybe do some drugs too. That might happen. And I would argue against every one of those as being a man, right? Like that's not what makes a man. But again, we have different expectations, right? And I think the older men, the older you get, the different expectations that you have. But I think one expectation that we can all get behind is that they learn to make decisions on their own and live by their decisions, stand by their decisions, including in the face of adversity from their friends. And that means we have to treat them like a man. So you identify the moment, you expect to act like a man, and then you treat them like a man. And that video does not treat men like men. It treats men like little boys. And it's gross. You want to talk toxic masculinity? That video is toxic masculinity because it's teaching men. It doesn't teach them to be responsible for their decisions. All right. That's my show today. I thank you for watching, and I hope that you found the episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. Eastern for an informed discussion on politics and culture. I do want to point out, sorry that I wasn't available yesterday. Had a family thing going on. Took care of that. All is well. We're good to go here. Make sure that you're subscribed to my Rumble channel Or if you prefer my YouTube channel, you can go to rumble.libertydad.com, or you can go to youtube.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.